Christmas dinner was supposed to be warm, loud, and comforting. The kind where plates clink, laughter fills the room, and for a few hours, everyone pretends that family problems don't exist. That night, the house smelled like roasted chicken, cinnamon, and pine from the Christmas tree in the corner. Fairy lights blinked softly, reflecting off glasses of juice and half-filled plates. I remember thinking for just a moment that maybe this year would be different. Maybe this Christmas would pass without tension, without old wounds being reopened. I should have known better. Everyone was there. My parents sat side by side, acting polite but distant. My aunt kept checking her phone. My cousins argued over who got the last dinner roll. And at the head of the table sat my grandmother. Calm, quiet, watching. She had that way about her, the way she could say nothing and still make you feel seen. Or judged. Or both. Her silver hair was neatly pinned back, her hands folded in her lap, eyes sharp despite her age. I had just moved into my new home a few months earlier. It wasn't big or fancy, but it was mine. After years of saving, struggling, and starting over more times than I can count, I finally had a place I could lock the door behind me and breathe. No roommates. No borrowed space. No feeling like I owed anyone anything. My family knew this, of course. They had opinions about it from the moment I mentioned moving out. Some said I was rushing. Others said I was being ungrateful for not staying closer. A few even hinted that I wouldn't manage on my own. I learned to smile and nod, to brush it off, to keep my excitement quiet. I told myself it didn't matter what they thought. This was my life. Dinner went on like any other holiday meal. Small talk. Forced smiles. Stories we'd all heard before. I laughed when I was supposed to. I passed the dishes. I avoided eye contact when certain topics came up. I thought I was doing well. I thought I was invisible enough. Then my grandmother cleared her throat. The table slowly went quiet. Forks paused midair. Conversations faded. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. When my grandmother spoke, people listened. She turned her head slightly and looked straight at me. Not the soft, proud look people expect from a grandmother. This was different. Curious. Measuring. She smiled, just a little, and said, "So, how are you enjoying your new home?" The question itself sounded harmless. Almost kind. Anyone listening from the outside would think it was simple interest, maybe even pride. But something in her tone made my chest tighten. It was the pause before she spoke. The way her eyes lingered on my face. The sudden silence that followed her words. Every pair of eyes at that table turned toward me. I felt my throat go dry. My mind raced through possible answers. Should I keep it light? Should I say it's great and move on? Should I joke? Or was this one of those moments where honesty would only make things worse? I could feel old memories creeping in, moments where one sentence from her had shifted the mood of an entire room. Moments where what sounded like a question was really a test. I smiled, the polite smile I'd perfected over the years. "It's good," I said. "It's been an adjustment, but I like it." She nodded slowly, as if she'd expected that answer. As if she'd already decided what it meant. My aunt leaned forward slightly. My mother looked down at her plate. My father cleared his throat. The air felt heavier now, like the room had shrunk. Grandma tilted her head. "An adjustment," she repeated. "That's interesting." I laughed softly, trying to ease the tension. "Well, living on your own always is, right?" She didn't laugh. Instead, she placed her napkin on the table and folded her hands again. "I suppose it depends," she said. "Some people thrive when they're on their own. Others," she paused, just long enough for the words to sink in. "Others realize too late what they've given up." My heart started to pound. I could feel my cheeks warming. This wasn't just curiosity anymore. This was something else. A message. A reminder. I glanced around the table, hoping someone would jump in, change the subject, save me. No one did. She continued, her voice calm but firm. "A home isn't just walls and furniture. It's about family, about knowing where you belong." The word belong hit me harder than I expected. I thought about the nights I'd spent alone in my new place, sitting on the floor with takeout, because I hadn't bought a dining table yet. The quiet mornings where no one criticized my choices. The peace. The loneliness. All of it mixed together. I thought about why I'd moved out in the first place. The arguments. The control. The feeling that no matter what I did, it was never enough. I do belong, I said, more defensively than I meant to. I just needed my own space. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Not angry, not surprised, almost satisfied. As if this was the response she was waiting for. Of course, she said. Everyone needs space. But space can change people. That's when I noticed something off. The way my mother shifted in her seat. The way my aunt suddenly stopped chewing. The way my cousin avoided looking at me. It felt like there was a shared understanding in the room, something I wasn't part of. Something they knew, and I didn't. I tried to laugh again. I promise I haven't changed that much. My grandmother reached for her glass, took a slow sip, and set it back down. We'll see, she said quietly. The conversation moved on after that, but the mood never fully recovered. I barely tasted my food. My hands shook slightly whenever I lifted my fork. My mind kept replaying her words. We'll see. See what? What was she implying? Why did that simple question feel like a door opening to something I wasn't ready to face? As dessert was being served, I felt a strange mix of dread and curiosity settle in my chest. Part of me wanted to leave early, to escape the uncomfortable energy hanging in the air. Another part of me wanted to ask her directly what she meant, to confront whatever unspoken tension had just surfaced. I didn't know it yet, but that one question at the Christmas dinner table was only the beginning. By the end of the night, something would be said that would change how I saw my family, my new home, and even myself. And when my grandmother finally revealed why she asked about my house, I realized that Christmas dinner wasn't just a family gathering anymore. It was a turning point. After dessert, people started drifting away from the table, pretending everything was normal. Plates were cleared, chairs scraped softly against the floor, and someone turned the music up just a little louder, as if sound alone could erase what had just happened. I stayed seated for a moment, staring at the empty spot where my grandmother's plate had been. My stomach felt tight, not from the food, but from the weight of her words. I replayed the moment over and over in my head. The way she asked about my new home, the look she gave me, the reactions from everyone else. It didn't make sense. If she was worried about me, why not say it plainly? And why did it feel like I'd walked into a conversation that had already been happening without me? Growing up, my grandmother had always been the center of the family. Decisions flowed through her, whether anyone admitted it or not. She wasn't loud or dramatic. She didn't need to be. Her influence was quiet but powerful. When she approved of something, everyone relaxed. When she didn't, people adjusted without question. I learned early on to read between her lines. That's part of why her question bothered me so much. As a kid, I spent a lot of time at her house. It was old, full of heavy furniture and family photos that went back decades. She liked things done a certain way, dinner at a certain time, shoes off at the door. No locked bedrooms. At the time, I didn't question it. It was just how things were. But as I got older, I started to notice how uncomfortable I felt there, like I was always being watched, always expected to fit into a mold that wasn't made for me. Moving into my new home was supposed to be freedom. I chose the place myself. I signed the papers with shaking hands and a hopeful heart. I remember unlocking the door for the first time, standing in the empty living room and feeling proud. Scared, yes, but proud. It wasn't perfect. The walls were plain. The neighborhood was quiet, but it was mine. Not everyone celebrated that milestone with me. Some family members smiled but asked too many questions. How much was the rent? Was I sure I could afford it? Wasn't it lonely? Others made comments that sounded like jokes, but felt sharp underneath. My grandmother didn't say much at all back then. She just nodded, like she was filing the information away for later. Now I wondered what she'd been thinking all this time. I stood up and carried my plate to the kitchen, where my mother was rinsing dishes. The sound of running water filled the space. I wanted to ask her if she noticed anything strange, if she knew what Grandma meant. But my mother avoided my eyes. She focused on scrubbing a plate that was already clean. She didn't mean anything by it, my mother said suddenly, as if reading my thoughts. "You don't know that," I replied quietly. My mother sighed. "It's Christmas. Let's not make it into something it's not." That response told me more than her words ever could. She knew something. Or, at least, she suspected something. And she didn't want to open that door. Later, as people gathered in the living room with cups of tea and leftovers, I noticed my grandmother sitting slightly apart from the rest of us. She was talking to my aunt in a low voice. When she saw me looking, she stopped speaking. My aunt nodded, stood up, and walked away. That familiar tight feeling returned to my chest. I tried to shake it off. I joined my cousins, laughed at a story, pretended to check my phone. But my attention kept drifting back to her. She watched me carefully, like she was waiting for something.
Or for me to say something.
At one point, she stood up and slowly made her way toward the hallway. As she passed me, she placed a hand lightly on my shoulder. The touch was gentle, but it made my skin prickle. "We'll talk later," she said softly. Not a question. A statement. The rest of the evening blurred together after that. I smiled when expected. I hugged people goodbye. I accepted leftover food wrapped in foil. But my mind was elsewhere. By the time I stepped outside into the cold night air, my nerves were shot. The drive back to my new home felt longer than usual. Streetlights flashed past as my thoughts raced. What kind of talk did she want to have? Was she unhappy with my choices? Was this about family expectations? Or something bigger? Something hidden? When I finally unlocked my front door and stepped inside, the quiet hit me. No voices. No music. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the soft creak of the floor beneath my feet. I set my keys down and leaned against the door for a moment, breathing deeply. I walked through the room slowly, noticing things I usually took comfort in. The couch I picked out myself. The photos I'd hung on the wall. The small Christmas decorations I'd put up, trying to make the place feel festive. For the first time since moving in, my home didn't feel entirely safe. Not physically, but emotionally. Like it held questions I hadn't asked yet. I thought about my grandmother's house. About family history. About things people didn't talk about. In our family, silence was common. Problems were pushed aside. Secrets were wrapped in politeness and tradition. I'd always told myself I was stepping away from that cycle by moving out. But now I wasn't so sure. Over the next few days, her question lingered with me. "How are you enjoying your new home?" It echoed in my mind at random moments, while I unpacked boxes I'd been avoiding, while I drank coffee alone in the morning, while I lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling. Then came the phone call. It was short and unexpected. My grandmother's voice sounded calm, almost cheerful. She asked how I was doing. She mentioned the weather. She commented on how nice Christmas dinner had been. Then, just as casually, she said she wanted to come see my place. "I'd love to visit your new home," she said. "It's important for family to know where each other lives." I hesitated. "Sure," I replied, though something in me screamed to say no. We set a date. She hung up. And just like that, the tension I'd been carrying tightened even more. I didn't tell anyone about the call. Not my parents. Not my cousins. I wasn't sure why. Maybe I wanted answers without interference. Or maybe I was afraid of what they'd say if they knew. In the days leading up to her visit, I cleaned obsessively. I rearranged furniture. I second-guessed every choice I'd made. Was the place too small? Too plain? Too independent? I hated that her opinion still held that much power over me. The night before she was supposed to come over, I stood in my living room and looked around, trying to see it through her eyes. I wondered what she would notice, what she would say, what she might not say. Because deep down, I knew she wasn't coming just to admire my new home. She was coming for a reason. And whatever that reason was, I had a feeling it had been waiting for me long before that Christmas dinner ever began. The morning my grandmother was supposed to visit, I woke up before my alarm, heart racing as if I'd been running in my sleep. The apartment was quiet, too quiet, and every little sound, the hum of the refrigerator, the occasional car outside, the faint groan of the pipes, seemed amplified. I brewed coffee slowly, hoping the warm aroma would calm my nerves, but it did little to settle the tight knot in my chest. Today was the day she would see my home, my space, my independence, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this visit would reveal more than she intended. I moved through the apartment, tidying up surfaces I'd left cluttered, straightening the couch cushions, and double-checking the small decorations I'd put out for the holidays. Normally, I took pride in my home, in the little details I'd chosen, but today I felt exposed. Each picture frame, each piece of furniture suddenly seemed like it could betray me. What if she thought I'd done something wrong? What if she found my place messy or too empty or too independent? I remembered the way she had asked about my home during Christmas dinner, her tone calm but loaded with meaning. How are you enjoying your new home? The question echoed in my mind, repeating like a warning. Not a simple question. Not just curiosity. Something beneath it, something I couldn't put my finger on yet. The phone rang, breaking my thoughts. I jumped. It was my mother. Good morning, she said cheerfully, though I could hear a note of caution in her voice. Grandma said she's leaving soon. Are you ready for her? I swallowed hard. I think so, I said, keeping my voice steady. Don't stress, she replied, but her words didn't match her tone. I could tell she was worried. Just let her see your place. Be yourself. Easier said than done. After hanging up, I tried to focus on other things. I checked the mail, rearranged the bookshelf, and even started a load of laundry. Yet every small sound made me jump. Every unexpected noise made me think she had arrived early, waiting outside to inspect, silently judging. I realized how much I'd internalized her presence, how her approval had always felt like something I needed, even when I thought I didn't. When the doorbell finally rang, I froze for a moment. My stomach dropped, and my hands went clammy. I took a deep breath and opened the door. My grandmother stood there, wearing a long coat and that composed expression I remembered from childhood. Her eyes scanned the doorway, sharp and unflinching, before she smiled lightly. Hello, she said. Hi, Grandma, I replied, stepping aside to let her in. Come on in. As she walked through the apartment, she paused in each room, taking it all in. Not the way a guest usually does, curiously or appreciatively, but slowly, deliberately. I could feel her evaluating every corner, every choice. I see you've made it very neat, she said, stopping by the living room couch. Very controlled. I smiled nervously. I like it that way. She nodded, her eyes lingering on a small photo of my childhood pinned to the wall. I see. Still holding on to memories. Her words weren't a compliment or a criticism, just observation. And it made my chest tighten even more. We moved to the kitchen, where I had set out coffee and a few pastries. I offered her a seat, but she waved me off. She wanted to stand, to look, to take in my apartment, as though it were a test. Do you live alone entirely? She asked casually, her gaze flicking to my small dining table. Yes, I replied. It's just me. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Just you, huh? No roommates? No distractions? I didn't know how to answer. Did she mean it literally or figuratively? I nodded anyway. She continued walking, touching a cushion lightly, opening a window slightly, then letting it close again. Every movement was deliberate, slow, almost ritualistic. I realized that this visit wasn't just about seeing my home, it was about understanding me, testing me, seeing if I had truly managed to live independently without losing myself in the process. As we moved through the apartment, my grandmother asked questions that seemed harmless at first. Do you cook often? Do you have neighbors? Are you happy there? But each question felt layered, loaded with judgment I couldn't quite place. I answered carefully, giving what I hoped were the right responses. Then, out of nowhere, she asked, have you thought about the future? About what it means to be truly on your own? Her voice was calm, but it carried weight. I froze, unsure how to respond. Did she mean financial independence? Emotional independence? Or something deeper, something about family, tradition, loyalty? Before I could answer, the phone rang. It was my cousin. She sounded breathless. "Hey, just checking in," she said. "Grandma's over? Everything okay?" "Yes," I said quickly, hanging up. "Everything's fine." But everything was not fine. Later, as we sat in the living room drinking coffee, my grandmother's tone shifted subtly. She started sharing stories about my parents when they were young, about choices they had made and lessons they had learned. At first, it was charming, almost like a history lesson, but as she spoke, I realized she was weaving a narrative that included me, an unspoken comparison, a subtle questioning of whether I could measure up. "You know," she said, leaning back, "when your mother moved into her first apartment, she didn't feel ready either. She thought she was prepared. But living alone teaches things you can't anticipate. You'll see." I forced a laugh, trying to hide my unease. "I hope I can handle it," I said lightly. Her eyes met mine. "You'll handle it, I'm sure. But handling it isn't always the same as thriving. That takes something more." And there it was again, the subtle tension I couldn't name. Something she expected of me. Something I wasn't sure I had yet. As the visit continued, I noticed little things. How she subtly rearranged a stack of magazines, how she paused to read a note on my fridge, how she lingered near the window, watching the street outside. Each action felt intentional, almost like she was mapping out my life, assessing my space, my choices, my independence. At one point, she asked about the neighbors. I told her about the young couple next door, how they were friendly, but mostly kept to themselves. She nodded slowly, as if that answered some unspoken question. Then she asked about my work, my routine, my friends. Every question was precise, measured, and carried that weight I could never shake. I realized then that this visit wasn't just about my home.
It was about me.
Who I had become. The decisions I'd made. Whether I was ready to live my life on my own terms, or whether I had only fooled myself into thinking I was independent. When she finally left, she gave me a small smile, said she'd be in touch, and walked out the door. I closed it behind her and leaned against it, shaking slightly. I didn't know what to feel. Relief? Anxiety?
Confusion?
All of it at once. That night, I sat in my living room, staring at the dim Christmas lights I had left on, wondering what she had seen in my home. Did she approve? Disapprove? Was her visit just curiosity? Or a test? And as I lay in bed, sleep refusing me, I realized that the question she had asked at Christmas dinner wasn't finished. It hadn't been answered. And somehow, I had a feeling it was far from over. Because my grandmother had a way of making the past, the present, and the future collide in a single question. And now, that question was mine to answer, but I wasn't sure I even knew what it really was. The days after my grandmother's visit felt heavier than usual. Each morning I woke up with a sense of anticipation, like waiting for a storm that might not arrive but could sweep through at any moment. I couldn't stop thinking about her words, her looks, and the subtle way she had examined my home, as if she were reading me, piece by piece. I kept replaying her question from Christmas dinner. "How are you enjoying your new home?" Only now it felt like a challenge, a test I wasn't sure I was ready for. I started noticing small things around my apartment that I had never paid attention to before. Was my space too empty? Too loud? Did the decorations make me look childish? Or worse, careless? Every choice I had made suddenly felt exposed under her invisible scrutiny. Even my furniture arrangement, which I had chosen because it felt comfortable, now seemed like it could be criticized. The more I tried to ignore it, the more I felt watched, not physically, but in the sense that every decision I made was being measured against some unseen standard she had set. My parents called more frequently than usual. My mother's voice was overly cheerful at first, but underneath, I could hear concern. My father asked more questions than normal, probing subtly about my grandmother's visit, about whether she had said anything unexpected, about how I was coping on my own. I gave polite answers, deflecting when I could, but even my own words sounded hollow to me. The anxiety had begun to infiltrate every corner of my life. Then, a few days later, my phone rang again. It was my grandmother. I froze before picking up. "Hello," I said cautiously. "Good morning," she said, her voice calm but carrying that same weight it always did. "I've been thinking about your place, your life on your own." I swallowed. "Yes. I'd like to come by again," she said. "There are things I think you should understand, things it's time we discuss." Her words sent a shiver down my spine. I could sense the intention behind them. Not casual interest, not a friendly check-in, but something deeper, something almost unavoidable. I agreed, even though my stomach twisted with unease. In the days leading up to her second visit, my anxiety grew. I tried to prepare the apartment, arranging everything perfectly, double-checking the smallest details. But no matter how much I cleaned or organized, I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't about appearances. It was about me, about my choices, about whether I was truly ready for independence. I found myself pacing late at night, replaying conversations with her, imagining what she might say, what she might reveal, what I might learn or lose. On the day of her visit, I noticed how heavy the air felt as I opened the door. My grandmother didn't wait for an invitation. She stepped inside with that quiet confidence that made it impossible to hide anything. She walked slowly, her gaze sweeping across the room, pausing on certain corners, certain objects, lingering just long enough to make me feel exposed. "I see you've been busy," she said, almost to herself. "Keeping things in order, trying to control what can't be controlled." I didn't know how to answer. Did she mean the apartment or my life? I forced a smile. "I like things tidy." She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she wandered into the kitchen, opening cupboards and drawers, her hands gliding over the surfaces as if testing them. "Independence is not just about space," she said finally, turning to me. "It's about understanding what comes with it, responsibility, solitude, consequences. Do you?" Her words hit harder than I expected. I had thought I was ready. I had thought I understood what living alone meant. But now, in the presence of her calm but probing attention, I questioned everything I had done. Had I really prepared myself for the choices and challenges of living independently? Had I understood what it meant to have my own space without guidance, without the structure my family had always provided? We moved to the living room, and she sat down, gesturing for me to do the same. "You've grown," she said almost softly, "but growth is messy. It's uncomfortable. And sometimes, it reveals truths people would rather ignore." I sat down, my palms sweating. I tried to respond lightly, to downplay the tension, but the words stuck in my throat. I felt like a child being tested, yet also like an adult being questioned on choices that were mine alone. Then she leaned forward slightly, her gaze sharp. "Do you know why I asked about your home that night at Christmas?" I opened my mouth to answer, but no words came. "It wasn't just curiosity," she continued. "I needed to see if you were ready. If you could manage more than just walls and furniture. If you could face yourself, your choices, without flinching." The weight of her words pressed down on me. I realized then that this visit, her presence, her questions, were not about approval or criticism. They were about confrontation. A confrontation with the truth about myself, about my family, about what it truly meant to be independent. I wanted to ask her what she meant, to demand clarity. But I didn't. Something told me that whatever she revealed next, I had to discover on my own. Over the next hour, she asked more questions, each one deeper than the last. Questions about my relationships, my plans, my priorities. Questions about whether I understood the responsibilities I had taken on. And all the while, I felt the tension rise, not just between us, but within myself. Was I truly ready for the independence I had fought so hard to achieve? Or had I only scratched the surface, ignoring deeper challenges, deeper truths? By the time she finally stood to leave, I felt drained, shaken, more vulnerable than I had in years. She gave me a small, knowing smile, one that suggested she had seen everything she needed to see, but not yet revealed it all. As the door closed behind her, I sat in silence, staring at the floor, my mind racing. The questions she had asked, the truths she had hinted at, pressed on me like a weight I couldn't lift. I realized that Christmas dinner, her visit, the questions, They were all leading to something I wasn't ready for yet. Something that would test me, challenge me, and force me to confront realities I had been avoiding. And I knew, deep down, that when the next moment came, the moment that would reveal the full truth, I wouldn't be able to turn away. The tension was unbearable, yet impossible to ignore. Something was coming. Something that would change everything. And all I could do was wait, heart pounding, wondering what she would say next, and whether I was truly ready to face it. That night, sleep eluded me completely. I kept replaying every word my grandmother had said, every pause, every glance. Her questions had dug deeper than I ever expected, touching on parts of my life I hadn't even fully examined myself. I kept thinking I understood independence, that I had mastered living on my own. But now, doubt gnawed at me from every corner of my mind. Had I been fooling myself all along? Or worse, had I been fooling everyone else too? The next morning, just as I was brewing coffee, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my cousin, short and abrupt. Call me.
Now.
It's about Grandma. My heart skipped. I dialed immediately, my fingers trembling. Hey, what's going on? I asked. There was a pause, a sharp inhale. You need to know. Don't panic, but something's happening with Grandma. Something she didn't tell anyone. What do you mean? I asked, though a cold knot formed in my stomach. She's been asking about your home and about you specifically, but not in a normal way. She's involved in, well, she's been keeping something from all of us, and it's serious. I think it has to do with the house, your place, and your safety. My grip tightened around the mug. Safety?
What are you talking about?
I can't explain over the phone, my cousin whispered. Just be careful. Watch everything. Don't let her in alone next time. I stared at the screen long after the call ended. My grandmother, keeping something from the family? Something serious? The thought felt impossible, yet undeniable. How could someone so composed, so gentle, be hiding anything that could affect me? The following day, she called again, this time arranging to come over in the afternoon. My stomach churned with dread. I debated telling my parents, my cousins, anyone, but something stopped me. Part of me feared they would interfere before I could understand what was really happening. Part of me needed to face this myself. When she arrived, she carried herself with the same calm, deliberate poise. But there was a subtle intensity one hadn't noticed before. She stepped inside, glanced around, and her gaze lingered on my front door as if measuring something beyond the physical threshold. I wanted to talk more about your home, she said, her voice soft but firm, and about some responsibilities you might not realize come with living alone. I nodded, though every instinct screamed caution. Something about the way she said responsibilities felt like a warning I couldn't yet decipher. As we moved through the apartment, she paused at the hallway, her eyes narrowing slightly. I heard something recently, she said almost casually. Something that made me wonder if you're aware of your surroundings, of the people who might notice your absence. Your routines. Your habits. My throat went dry. I don't understand. You will, she said, turning to face me fully. Some things are best seen before it's too late. Before I could respond, she walked toward my living room window and looked out at the quiet street. The air felt thick, heavy, as if the walls themselves were pressing in. My mind raced with possibilities. Was she talking about a break-in? A scam? Something in my past I had thought was buried? Then came the twist I never expected. She turned to me, a faint smile playing on her lips, but her eyes were sharp and serious. I know someone has been watching you, she said. Not just as family. Someone from outside. Someone who wants something from your life, from your home. My chest tightened. What who? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she gestured toward the kitchen table. Sit. I'll explain. But you need to promise me you'll listen, without judgment, without interruption. I obeyed, my hands shaking as I sank into the chair. She leaned down, her voice dropping to a low, urgent tone. Years ago, when your parents were younger, there was an incident. Something that never left our family, though we kept it quiet. It involved the house you now live in and the people connected to it. I didn't think it would ever touch you, but it has. And that's why I've been so deliberate in watching your life, your routines, your choices. I felt my stomach drop. My new home, the place I thought was mine and mine alone, suddenly felt like a puzzle I didn't know I was part of. Someone had been paying attention to me, to my life, for reasons I couldn't yet understand. My grandmother's careful scrutiny, her questions, her comments about responsibility and independence, they weren't just about testing me. They were preparation. "Are you saying I'm in danger?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm saying," she corrected, "that you're being targeted in ways you wouldn't even notice unless someone warned you. And I needed to see if you were ready to handle it, because soon, you may have no choice but to face it head on." My head was spinning. Every choice I had made, every day I had spent alone in my apartment, suddenly felt precarious. The independence I had celebrated now seemed fragile, vulnerable. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" I asked, my voice shaky. "I needed to know if you could manage," she said calmly. "I needed to see if you were aware enough to notice the signs. Many people wouldn't. Many people would be blindsided. But you," her eyes softened for the first time that day, "you might just be able to handle it." I didn't know whether to feel reassured or terrified. My grandmother had always been a guardian in ways I barely understood, but this was different. This wasn't just family wisdom or guidance. This was a warning about something dangerous, something I had never imagined. And then she added something that made my heart stop. "There's one more thing you need to know, something about the people around you, even those you trust. Not everyone is who they seem." The words hung in the air, heavy, suffocating. My mind raced through faces, conversations, small details I'd overlooked. Was someone close to me part of this? Were my neighbors involved somehow? Was my independence itself a threat to them? I wanted to ask, to demand clarity, but the weight of her gaze made me pause. I realized that the story, the danger, the secrets, it was bigger than I had imagined. And as she finally stood to leave, giving me that faint, knowing smile, I understood one thing. Christmas dinner had been only the beginning. The real test, the real danger, and the secrets that could change everything were only just beginning to unfold. And now, I had to figure out who I could trust, what I could believe, and whether I was ready to face the truth waiting just beyond the walls of my new home. The following night, I couldn't sleep. My grandmother's words kept echoing in my mind. The warning about someone watching me, about the history connected to my home, about the danger I hadn't realized existed. I paced the apartment, scanning the windows, checking the locks, and trying to make sense of it all. Every shadow, every creak felt loaded with significance. Then, just past midnight, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Now." My heart skipped. Every instinct screamed that this could be connected to what my grandmother had warned me about, but a part of me was curious, desperate to understand. I grabbed my coat and stepped into the quiet night, following the directions in the message to a small, dimly lit cafe. Inside, the figure waiting for me was not a stranger. It was my neighbor, the quiet young man who had always smiled politely but said little. He looked anxious, glancing over his shoulder. "I didn't know how else to reach you," he whispered. "I think someone's been watching you for weeks. Not just your home, your routines, your habits, even your friends. It's connected to something from your family's past and your grandmother. She's been protecting you." I felt the floor shift beneath me. Everything my grandmother had hinted at was true. And yet, the revelation made the stakes even higher. I pressed him for details. He told me about a distant relative who had once been involved in illegal dealings, someone who had vanished but left behind secrets and grudges. According to him, that relative's associates had tracked the family for years, and now, with me living alone, they saw an opportunity. I realized then why my grandmother had been so deliberate in her questions, her observations, her tests. She hadn't been judging me. She had been preparing me, making sure I could recognize danger and think clearly under pressure. When I returned home, I found her waiting in the living room, calm as ever, as if she had known I'd need guidance. "I see you've already started to uncover the truth," she said, a faint smile on her lips. "You're ready." "Ready? I don't even know what all of this means yet," I said, my voice shaking. She nodded. "You will. The key is knowing who to trust and acting before it's too late." For the next few hours, we devised a plan together. She showed me how to protect my home, monitor my surroundings, and recognize suspicious behavior. She told me things about my family history I had never known, secrets about resilience, mistakes, and dangers that had been kept hidden for my protection. The weight of her guidance was heavy, but I felt stronger for it. Then, just as we thought we had prepared for the worst, the unexpected happened. A knock at the door. My heart raced. It wasn't the police. It wasn't my parents. It was my cousin, breathless and frantic. "I overheard something," she said, "and I think the threat is closer than we thought. It's inside the house." We froze. The tension was unbearable. My grandmother's calm demeanor never wavered, but her eyes sharpened. "This is the final test," she said. "You have to face it yourself." I moved toward the front door, checking every corner, every shadow, my grandmother and cousin close behind. Then, in the living room, we saw movement, a figure stepping out from behind the curtain. My breath caught. It wasn't a stranger. It was my aunt. She looked shocked to see us. What is this?" she stammered. My grandmother stepped forward. "We knew you were looking for answers, but trying to uncover them on your own wasn't safe. The truth was never what it seemed, and your curiosity almost put you in danger." It turned out my aunt had unknowingly been manipulated by someone from our family's past. She had been feeding small pieces of information without realizing the full implications. The danger wasn't malevolent in intention toward me. It had been a test, a trap set by the remnants of old family conflicts, now exposed and dismantled by my grandmother's foresight. Relief washed over me, but it was tinged with disbelief. The house that had felt like a battlefield was finally safe, the threats neutralized, and the secrets laid bare. Yet even in resolution, I realized the stakes had permanently changed my perspective on independence, family, and trust. My grandmother looked at me with that piercing calm again. "You've handled yourself well. Independence isn't just about living alone. It's about recognizing danger, making decisions under pressure, and understanding the depth of those around you. You've learned all of that tonight." I nodded, exhausted but empowered. The main conflict, the threat to my safety, the hidden family secrets, the challenge to my independence, had been confronted and resolved. My home was mine, truly, and I had proven to myself that I could protect it. Just as I felt relief begin to settle, my grandmother's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, her expression subtle but serious. "It seems," she said quietly, "this isn't completely over." I froze. "What do you mean?" She didn't answer. She only smiled faintly, a mixture of warning and reassurance. Some stories, like some Christmas truths, always leave one more twist waiting around the corner. And in that moment, I realized that independence, family, and safety were not simple things. Even when conflicts resolve, life has a way of keeping the suspense alive, just enough to remind you that vigilance, wisdom, and courage are never truly optional. I looked around my apartment, the place I had fought to call my own, and understood that this was only the beginning. And somewhere, just beyond the walls I had come to love, the next chapter was quietly waiting. After the night of revelations, the apartment felt different, lighter, somehow. The tension that had hung over me for weeks had loosened, replaced by a cautious sense of clarity. I moved slowly through the rooms, noticing details I hadn't appreciated before. The way the sunlight hit the living room floor in the late afternoon, the smell of fresh coffee drifting from the kitchen, the faint hum of the refrigerator, now almost comforting instead of ominous. My home, my space, felt truly mine for the first time. My grandmother stayed a while longer, guiding me through small but important steps, checking the locks, setting up emergency contacts, learning how to observe subtle signs of danger without paranoia. She explained why every question she had asked during Christmas dinner and her subsequent visits had mattered. It wasn't about control, It was about awareness, about cultivating independence that included vigilance and wisdom. She showed me that independence wasn't simply having a home to call your own. It was knowing how to protect it, how to make decisions, and how to navigate both family and life's unpredictable challenges. Even my cousin stayed to help. Together, we reviewed my daily routines, identifying small risks I'd overlooked. She apologized for not being able to warn me sooner and explained how she had only recently realized the full scope of what my grandmother had been trying to protect me from. Her support reminded me that family could be complicated, messy, but ultimately grounding. Trust, I realized, had layers, and learning to navigate them was part of growing up. My aunt's confession also brought relief and understanding. She hadn't intended harm. She had simply been caught in the web of past family conflicts and manipulations. Seeing her remorseful and sincere allowed me to release some of the anger and resentment I'd held onto. We talked, tentatively at first, then with more openness. By the end, I felt a small but real shift in our relationship. There was no instant perfect resolution, but acknowledgement and honesty laid the foundation for rebuilding trust. In the days that followed, life slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy, though I carried the lessons of those tense nights with me. I established small routines to stay aware of my surroundings without letting fear dominate my life. I made minor adjustments in my apartment, practical things my grandmother had suggested, but more importantly, I carried a mental preparedness that gave me confidence I hadn't had before. Living alone was no longer just a novelty or a victory. It was responsibility, awareness, and empowerment. I also started to reflect on the broader family dynamics. I realized that the tension at Christmas dinner, the subtle judgments, and the careful observations weren't isolated incidents. They were part of a family culture shaped by history, secrets, and lessons passed down through generations. Understanding this gave me compassion for my relatives and allowed me to see that many of their actions, though frustrating at the time, came from care, concern, and a desire to prepare me for challenges I couldn't yet foresee. One evening, as I sat in my living room, sipping tea and watching the lights outside, my grandmother called. "I'm proud of you," she said simply. "You've learned to face uncertainty without losing yourself. That's what matters." I smiled, a mixture of relief and gratitude flooding me. "I couldn't have done it without you," I admitted. "Your guidance, it changed everything." She chuckled softly. "It wasn't just guidance. It was experience, wisdom, and now you have your own." We talked a little longer, sharing memories and small stories about the past. For the first time, I felt connected not only to my home but to my family in a way that was grounded, honest, and unshakable. The secrets and tensions that had haunted us didn't vanish, but they no longer controlled the present. As Christmas gave way to the quiet of early January, I started to notice the subtle ways my home had changed me. I moved with more confidence, made decisions more deliberately, and treated both my space and my family relationships with a thoughtful awareness. Even simple acts, like brewing coffee in the morning or arranging my living room, felt like exercises in self-respect and independence. I realized that owning a home was not just about physical space, but about mental clarity, responsibility, and understanding the stakes of every choice. My grandmother's visits became less about instruction and more about conversation and connection. I began to see her not only as a guide, but as a partner in navigating life's complexities. Her questions no longer carried tension, they carried care. And the realization hit me that the real gift she had given me wasn't just safety or advice. It was the ability to trust myself, to recognize risk, and to act with awareness in all aspects of life. Over time, even my aunt and cousin grew closer. The events had forced honesty and transparency, creating opportunities for reconciliation and mutual understanding. Family dynamics, I learned, weren't static. They shifted with awareness, dialogue, and forgiveness. I felt a newfound appreciation for the bonds we shared, complicated though they were. By the time the next holiday season approached, my apartment felt alive with warmth, security, and history. I celebrated Christmas again, this time with a sense of peace I had never known before. I laughed freely, offered help without hesitation, and shared stories without fear of judgment. The past conflicts remained, but they were framed differently, less as burdens and more as lessons that had shaped my resilience. One quiet evening, as I sat by the window, looking at the glow of streetlights on the snow-covered sidewalks, I reflected on everything that had happened. I thought about the threats, the revelations, the tension, and the lessons. I realized that independence wasn't a single achievement. It was a journey, a balance between self-reliance and connection, between caution and trust. Every challenge, every question from my grandmother, every moment of fear had contributed to my growth. Even the unexpected twists, the messages, the unknown threats, the hidden family history had forced me to see the world in a new way. I understood that life rarely follows a simple, predictable path. The key, I realized, was awareness, courage, and the willingness to act wisely when faced with uncertainty. In the end, the apartment wasn't just a home. It was a testament to my resilience, my ability to navigate challenges, and my commitment to my own life and choices. The main conflicts had been confronted, the dangers neutralized, and the family's secrets illuminated. Yet even as resolution settled in, I knew life would continue to present lessons, twists, and moments that demanded courage. And that was the takeaway. Independence, family, and personal growth were intertwined. True strength wasn't just about protecting oneself or one's home. It was about understanding the past, facing uncertainty, and building trust and awareness in every relationship. As I turned off the lights and prepared for bed, I smiled at the small, quiet apartment that had once felt overwhelming but now felt like the foundation of my life. It was mine, truly mine, but it was also connected to family, history, and lessons that would guide me long into the future. Christmas dinner, the visits, the revelations, they had all been part of a journey. And though surprises could still appear around the corner, I knew that with vigilance, trust, and courage, I was ready to face whatever came next. For the first time in a long while, I felt truly at home, not just in my apartment, but in my life. And that, I realized, was the most important gift of all.